Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. Opening day. Again. Opening night. Cubs don't play a home game. Cubs don't play a day game until Sunday. I mean, I get that the Diamondbacks play in the desert, but they do know, right, that they played in a airplane hangar with a lid on it, that they could have played at 1 o'clock their time today. I also found it very odd on opening day that nobody started playing until 2 o'clock Central. Cincinnati had their crappy little parade and everything, and they still didn't start till 3. Of course, that's probably not their choice. Remember when they threw their little tantrum? We used to always get to be the first team to play, and then when ESPN started showing games, they're like, we don't want to show the fucking Reds first every year. Finding some real teams. Well, maybe with ESPN bailing on baseball, the Reds can go back to their 11 o'clock start on the first day. I mean, a baseball parade sounds like a good idea, but you've ever been to Cincinnati? Do you really want to walk around with those people? No, of course you don't. Anyway, opening day 2.0. The Cubs are already 0-2, which seems fitting. But I'm sure they can get a win here sometime in the next couple of weeks. It'll be fun. Justin Steele is going to make consecutive starts. Oh, Boog is going to make a hay out of that tonight. I guarantee you. That's going to be very exciting to him. And I'm sure they will recall the fact that Zach Greinke once made 3 starts in a row for I think it was when he was in the Astros. 2 days before the All-Star break, in the first inning, he got tossed in a start for arguing with the umpire. So they had him start the next day because he had barely pitched. And then he started the first game after the break. So that was kind of fun. But Justin Steele is he going to be the first pitcher to start consecutive games on different continents? Probably not. I would guess one of these other, maybe it was Kyle Farnsworth 25 years ago. He started game 2 in Tokyo. He start game 3? Probably not. But we'll see. So the Cubs open the season for real now. Got those 2 kind of fake, but counting the standings games against the Dodgers B team, and where they lost them both, which was fun. They scored 8 runs in 4 games in Japan, including 2 against Japanese league teams. But I'm sure it was because of the balls. Weird little Alex Cohen was obsessed with the fact that the Japanese baseball is a fraction smaller than the Major League one, and it has it's tackified. And it's not like a basketball; it doesn't have the little dimples on it, but it's tacky because they don't have the river in Pennsylvania, wherever the fuck it is that baseball goes and gets the mud. The umps rub all over their balls and the baseballs. They don't have that. I'm sure there's no Japanese river. I watched Shogun. It's a pretty cool looking rivers there. Maybe they ought to give that a shot. But they have a tacky ball, and apparently the tacky ball didn't carry as well, and that's why the Cubs couldn't homer. They didn't come close to hitting a home run in Japan in 4 games. But I'm sure it's fine. Really. Was Jed there? Was the wind howling in the Tokyo Dome? Well, they turn the air conditioning on when we're batting. Every time. Don't get it. We talked about this probably on multiple podcasts already. So I'll just bore you with it again. But it was alarming to me to see the lineup in action, and when you run out of good hitters after 3, and you've got Michael Busch hitting 4th. Poor little Matt Shaw just trying to get his feet wet in the big leagues, and he's got to bat 5th because he's the 5th best hitter. Maybe the 4th best hitter. I know Michael Busch hit 470 or whatever it was in the spring. I'm sure that'll translate perfectly. He's fine, I think. But the problem is they seem perfectly content. I feel them doing a very Ian Happ thing at first. Happ as a left fielder is no great shakes, right? Like he doesn't hit really well enough. He's not enough of an impact bat to be your left fielder unless you're getting power from other spots. But the Cubs are just fine with it. And I kind of feel like Busch is going to be the same at first base. So I can be like, no, that's perfectly adequate. Well, that's good because that's what we're going for is adequate. That could be the could be the slogan. Cubs baseball, perfectly adequate. Or if that would be edgy, imperfectly adequate. That's even better. But we will see. We talked about how Matt Shaw has a real number now, 6. So he looks more like a baseball player than wearing 77. I think he ought to be lining up next to Mark Bortz. It's a very, very timely football reference. So he looked better. I still think the swing is dumb. Like, I really like Matt, and I think he's going to be a good player. It's one of those where like, well, we're not going to mess with his swing until he proves it doesn't work. I'm like, well, he's going to prove it doesn't work. So maybe, I know that, remember when John Malley fixed Jason Hayward before the first game Hayward ever played for the Cubs, and Hayward was terrible immediately for the Cubs. But it's just, you're not going to hit with it that big a leg kick. You're just not. I don't really care that he shows his butt to the pitcher. Maybe that could be. Seems very White Lotusy. But he's got his butt waving at the pitcher. It's that big leg kick, which I just feel like they're going to send him to Iowa and make him get rid of it and then come back. Maybe we could cut out the middleman and just get rid of it. Because I think he's going to be a nice player. He makes good contact and above average speed, although Cohen was acting like he was Ellie De La Cruz. It's like, no, he's not slow, but I don't know that he's fast. And I'm sure he'll play good defense at third. He had one bad. The bad throw in the first game was one where he tried to intentionally bounce the ball to first to speed it up, but he bounced it before it got to the pitcher's mound. So it was like skip 6 when it was sailing past Busch over towards the dugout. Made some nice plays in game 2. I'm not really worried about him. He's the least of their worries. I've convinced myself that Pete is going to become a star this year. Our little buddy Petecrow. Because I really like him too. He's one of my favorite Cubs in a long time. He's a fun player to watch, and he just seems like a really cool guy. Like, he already has it figured out. He's funny. He's a smart ass. He's mature beyond his years. I guess being raised by 12% of the cast of Heroes somehow works out. He seems very well grounded. I like him. He got a new number 2, number 4, and I'm surprised that our buddy Cole Wright kept a nickname. Maybe he hasn't seen trailers for Marvel movies this summer, but at some point, it's going to be a lot of Fantastic Four references for Pete, and I'm already tired of them. They haven't even started. There was a weird thing with Cole Wright. He did the games, the last 2 games. I guess the games against the Barbs when they came back and started spring training up again. He was working with Elise, and I like Elise quite a bit, actually. I think she's one of the few redeeming features of Marquee. And she read a promo for what used to be Cubs. What was their stupid Road to Wrigley? And now it's called the Cubs Farm Report. There's Orion Samuelson and Max. What was Max's name? Armstrong. Not available for the Farm Report. If they're going to do a Farm Report show, it should air at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's when the Farm Report shows should air. Or at noon. The noon show. I'm really dating myself. The noon show references. Anyway. It's now called the Cubs Farm Report. And she said, join. I forget who the host is. Maybe it's her. But it was somebody and Jim Callis and Lance Brzezinski and me. And then she said, oh, no, I know, Cole. I know you don't like it. It's improper grammar. It's I. It's not fucking I. It's me. You wouldn't say join I on the Cubs Farm Report. And that's how you figure out whether you use I or me. What are we in, 3rd grade? I mean, I know Cole went to community college. And I know Elise went to Cornell, which is the community college of Ivy League. Cornell is the school that kids who went to the Ivy League didn't really go to the Ivy League. It's like, oh, I went to Ivy League. Oh, how exciting for you. Where did you go? Cornell. Oh, I see. You went to the Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. of the Ivy League. Congratulations. But Elisa seems like a smart person, and she got the grammar right, or at least whoever wrote the copy did. I just found it annoying. He was making such a big deal out of it. The other thing he said, he went on this weird tirade. Basically, all she asked, I think she thought she asked a very innocent question, like, hey, how do you like the automatic balls and strikes? Because everybody likes it. Like, one of the problems this year is going to be that they proved in the spring that it works. And then we're going to just have a whole season without it for reasons. And there's going to be bad calls that they're like, if I were a player, I'd be patting myself on the head just to show up. Somebody's going to get thrown out of a game this year for patting himself on the head and looking at the ump like, I would challenge this piece of shit call if they would let me. And then he's going to get thrown out. Everybody seems to like it. Cole didn't like it. His reasoning was very odd. He's like, I think what they need to do is they need to take the umpires and they need to in spring training every year, they got to retest them to see if they can be a home plate umpire. And if they're not good at it, then they shouldn't be a home plate umpire. And if your crew only has 2 guys on it that would be good home plate umpires, then those 2 guys have to do every game behind the plate and everybody else rotates around them. And I thought, well, this is dumb. But it got even dumber when he said what they should do in spring training is they should give them a glove. And if they can't catch a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, they can't umpire home plate, because if you can't catch the ball, how could you call it? It's like, I think there's a difference between seeing where the ball went and catching it. He's a strange person, really. And he needs, it needs to end. It really does. But honestly, now that season started and he's basically, I will only see him during whatever the magic inning is where they do the gambling sponsorship. and he goes to Cliff Floyd. He's like, oh, the Cubs are over under to go +1 to score the rest of the game. And Cliff's like, oh, I'm taking the under. Because Cliff is smart. That's the only time we'll see him, because I will not watch their pre or their post game shows. In fact, I've joked, but it's real. If you've ever been down here in my lovely basement with me when the game ends, there's a scramble for the remote so I can change the channel before I have to see any second of the post game show. It's just terrible. I don't want to do it. Anyway, I was talking about Pete. So Pete had a great August last year. Great. Like, if he plays anywhere close to that, he's an all-star. You know, he was getting on base. He always plays great defense. He was stealing bases. He wasn't striking out. And they attributed that to his, he added the leg kick and Miguel Amaya got rid of the leg kick. So one of them, Miguel gave Pete his leg kick. And everybody's like, see, Pete's going to be a star. He's awesome. Pete was terrible in September. Like, fell right off the rails again. I mean, a month, for the last month of the season, he struck out in a third of his at-bats. He struck out 30 times in September in 90 at-bats. That's bad. So basically what I'm saying is I still think he's turning into a good player. I think the him turning into a star right away is not going to happen. He's still super young. And there's going to be ups and downs. There were ups and downs last year. Even after the up, there was a down. But I am much happier having him playing for Craig Counsell than I would be for David Ross. Craig's not going to freak out if Pete struggles a little bit. He's just going to keep playing. And Rossi would have had, I don't know, Carson Kelly playing a little center field. He struggles. You can fix anything with the backup catcher. What's the old thing? If the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, if you were a backup catcher, every problem could be solved with a backup catcher, I think. Something like that. The Michael Busch thing. Now, if the Cubs were a real team, I think the move they would have made when they got Kyle Tucker was they would have traded Michael Busch and they would have played Cody Bellinger at first base. Because Cody's a better player. Instead, Cody's going to the Yankees. And yes, his numbers will be better with the Yankees because Yankee Stadium's like a perfect place for him to play, but he's a better player. And I would be much happier with him in the middle of the lineup than Busch. I say this, and Busch will probably hit 28 home runs, made me look bad. There was a thing on Tuesday where I gave Dave the trivia question about how the Giants have gone the longest in baseball without a 30 home run hitter. Nobody's done it since Barry Bonds did it in 2004. And the fact that they won 3 World Series during that span of the 30 years, 30 years. See if somebody does it this year in the 31st. Now, what year is it? 21st. Jesus. I can't do math. Yes, it's 20. I hate to break it, you guys. This year, we had very extreme daylight savings. We actually sprung forward an hour and 10 years. Feels like it. 20 years without one. Not 30. They won 3 World Series during that time, so apparently maybe not super critical to have a guy hit 30 home runs, but it's nice. And the Cubs have the second longest streak. Nobody's done it since KB and Schwarbs, our buddies, did it in 2019. The last real season of Cubs baseball. And even that season went off the rails terribly. We got to talk about that, and we're talking about, well, not that many left-handed batters hit 30 for the Cubs, and really it was Billy and Schwarber. I kind of missed one, a big one. And if whenever we finally turn the video on this, over my right shoulder, you're going to see there's a box of Rizzo's on the shelf behind me. Anthony Rizzo did it. Kind of left him out. Sorry about that, Tony. Tony needs a job. So if the Busch thing goes terrible, he'll just bring him. Is Kevin still around? He should be. He's a little dachshund. They live a long time. Him and Kevin can come back. It'd be fun. We'll see what happens. Our good buddy Jedley got interviewed by our actual good friend Jon Greenberg, a 2-parter. It was a little slim. I think it could have been a 1-parter. It's 2 halves of an article over 2 days. So it made 1 article. He interviews Jed every spring. It started when Jed was the general manager, which is a nothing job with the Cubs, and had lots of time on his hands. And he still does it because John knows there's no reason to talk to Carter Hawkins. Carter's a complete dolt. Basically, Jed said all the things he's been saying. You know, he's not worried about his job. Why would you be worried about it when you know it's gone already? I actually don't think that's necessarily true. I think that the Ricketts, I think they're very happy with the job Jed does. Like, Jed stays within his budget. Every once in a while, he puts him in an uncomfortable position. He asks, can I get an extension on my allowance? And then but twice they've given it to him and he hasn't been able to get the deal done, which just makes them look good because like, oh yeah, we were willing to pay it, but we just couldn't get the tape to pick us. Alex Bregman said, much rather play for Boston. But if they flop this year, if they don't either make the playoffs I think they have to make the playoffs, and they should. But I could see them like playing well in the second half, and the Ricketts is rewarding Jetty with an extension, and then they flop again, and they miss, and he gets his team's job. So I don't think it's 100% if they miss the playoffs, he's out. It might also not be 100% that if they make the playoffs, he's back. But I'm kind of worried about, I don't think he's that good, but I'm kind of worried about who they'd end up with if they let him go. Like, we don't know. We had one good idea a long time ago for Theo, and we're completely out of ideas. So we're just gonna maybe we'll ask Theo back. He's got time on his hands, right? The big thing everybody wants to know is, are they going to make a strong bid to keep Kyle Tucker? And Jed has kind of this mealy-mouthed, he's a good player. Every team would like to have a guy like him for a long time. Well, that's not what we want to hear. We want to hear, absolutely. We've carved out a big chunk of budget next year. And if we don't, we're going to try to get Kyle. And if we don't, we're going to have that money to go find some other superstar if one comes available. He never says that because this whole thing was this weird half-assed effort to get one really good player and then stop and not continue to build around him, but not plan to keep him. And if Cam Smith has a good year for the Astros, it's just going to get worse. And the only reason it's going to get worse is, well, first, Cub fans are dumb. They would overreact to that regardless. But you have to give up good players or good prospects to get a great player, which is what they did. They had to give up somebody really good. The only reason this becomes uncomfortable is when it becomes very clear that you don't intend to keep the guy you got rid of, or to keep the guy you acquired. Then everyone's going to be like, why the hell did you do it in the first place? It's fine to give up Cam Smith for a year of Kyle Tucker, and if you got a drawer with $300 and some million in it, you're going to throw at him. And if he decides to go somewhere else, but you offered him a lot of money, we could probably forgive that. Although honestly, they should pay whatever. But if your whole plan is we're going to give up this hot shot prospect and we're just going to get this guy for a year, and then we're going to we'll get a comp pick when he leaves, which really seems to be the thing they're doing. It's like, oh, go fuck yourselves. It's like, just why? Why? This is the kind of shit that you're supposed to put up with in Milwaukee. Not in Chicago. But we're stuck with it. They're not even as good at running a team on the cheap as the Brewers are. And I guess if Jed's going to lose his job, he's going to lose his job because he's put together an 83-win team shouldn't cost you $260 million or whatever, $230. Shouldn't cost $230 million. You should be able to do that for half that. On the other hand, the thing in his defense is the pieces you need to put yourself over the top are expensive. And so stopping at 230 is just as dumb as spending it in the first place. So, they're 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I guess. How dumb do you want to be in which direction? As for Cam, I don't know if he's going to be really good. I mean, he would not be the first guy to have like a super hot spring and have a team. The Astros obviously have a vested interest in him being good as soon as possible to get their fans off their ass for getting rid of Kyle in the first place. It wouldn't be the first time that you like promote a guy and he's not really ready, and then you have to send him down and whatever. But he was really good. The one thing that I would caution people with is one of the knocks on him at Florida State were for a guy with a lot of power, he rarely pulls the ball. Like, it's great that he's strong and he can hit the ball the opposite to right field really hard. But usually that comes with a bunch of like 800-foot home runs to left too, and he just doesn't seem to do that. And most of his highlights in the spring were him crushing the ball to right field, which is great. But it also kind of makes you wonder, how can you get around on a hard pitch? Or are you going to right all that time on purpose, or is it because you're late? I guess we'll find out. I have a feeling he'll figure it out regardless. The Cubs had to make some roster moves to get ready for the season for real. They had a bigger than normal roster for the games in Tokyo. They had 31 men, and you could put 5 on the taxi squad. So they didn't have to get quite as. They didn't have to worry about Brad Keller. He could just not be on the roster because it was still spring. But when they got to the real cut down for Thursday, opening day, they had to make the real moves. And it really came down to 2 things. It was coming down to Tater, Workman, or Vidal Brujan for the last bench spot, and Brad Keller or somebody else. In this case, it looked like it was going to be Tyson Miller for the last bullpen spot, or whoever the last bullpenner was going to be. Tyson was terrible all spring. Couldn't throw a strike for like the first 3 starts, and just awful. And so the Cubs did the thing where suddenly the guys who were going to lose the competition both hurt. I forget what Vidal's his elbow. Apparently he bumped his elbow. And Miller's is some kind of hip thing. I would guess that Vidal's elbow injury will last however long it takes for Gage to prove that he's bad. And then Vidal will be fine. Miraculously. But like I said, this goes down to the whole thing about the worst time to cut somebody is the last days of spring training, because you're far more likely to lose those guys if you really want to keep them, because everybody's roster is in flux and people are like, they're adding and they're getting rid of guys. And they're like, yeah, this guy's better than the guy we were going to keep. And then once the season starts, then teams are a little more locked in. They're less willing to make moves, and sometimes they've fallen in love with the guys they kept. And you can sneak up through after a few days before they realize those guys blow, and then they wish they had stolen your guy instead. So that could very well be the thinking, that they could get Bruhan to Iowa later. The roster move they had to make, now, not only did they have to find a spot for a 26-man spot for Brad Keller, they had to find a 40-man spot for him. And oh gosh, guys, the Cody Poteet era might very well be over before it started. The only thing they got for Cody Bellinger, this run-of-the-mill, mediocre 30-year-old, mostly minor league pitcher, shockingly didn't make the roster. I would guess there's a decent chance Cody clears waivers, though, so he may very well end up in Iowa. Anyway, the Brad Keller thing, I guess we'll find out how wonderful the pitch lab really is, because nothing in Brad Keller's history has shown that he's any good. He's pitched in the big leagues parts of 7 seasons, and he's been mostly bad. And he doesn't strike people out, and he gives up a lot of hits, and those are 2 bad things. But they claim they fixed him, and now he's finally the pitcher he was always meant to be, and it's all going to be great. So we'll find out. I'm fully expecting Brad to be DFA'd before. I was going to say tax day, but end of April. By the time you're planting your garden, Brad Keller would have free time to come over and help. Does anybody plant gardens anymore? Yeah, I think somebody's got it. So the roster is, I guess, set. And what a roster it is. They are, it's a pretty good team. I mean, they didn't look like it in Japan. Japan, not only did they didn't play well, and it was not exciting. They had 1 lead. It was 1-0. Showed up, pitched 4 hitless innings. We didn't notice because he was walking people. And, it was 2 bad baseball games. Nothing like getting up at 4:30 in the morning so you could get ready to watch them do that twice. So in my life, I've gotten up that early to see 4 Cub games, and they've been pretty much crap. Well, actually, that's not even true. The 2000 games, they won game 1 and they lost game 2 in extra innings on a Benny Agbayani grand slam. They almost won them both. So I guess what it proves is Don Baylor, a much better Japanese manager, and I guess it doesn't make him Japanese, manager in Japan than Craig Counsell. Don is not with us anymore, so he couldn't. Maybe the Cubs would have brought him back just for those 2 games. Hey, Don, you want to manage Cubs 2 more times? So that was not an option. It's too bad. The Cubs, as far as I can tell, and I don't know how I'm going to know. I guess I'll have to see other people complaining about it. Because I have Comcast and I have the stupid sports and entertainment package that they're going to be moving to. I won't notice when they've moved because they don't sound like they change channel numbers, although maybe I'll get I could get something from Comcast, like bragging about, hey, all that extra money you foolishly spend to get the SEC network, whatever the hell I get it for. Actually, I know what I get it for. I get it because Red Zone is on there, and I love Red Zone. And it's there's other stuff, so I could simply pay for it during the football season and then drop it. But there's enough other good stuff on there that I watch. I think even TCM, I'm pretty sure that's how you get TCM, which is weird, but it's sports and entertainment. So sports and old movies. Although I have Max, so I guess I don't need TCM because I can just anyway. I don't know how I'll notice when they move to that tier because the channel numbers aren't going to change, so I won't know. But I guess I'll hear from other people. But I bring that up only because it's strange to me. Now there were a lot of regional sports network moves the last couple of weeks. A couple of big ones. The A's and the Giants both handed their rights over to Major League Baseball. Basically, they got rid of the blackouts, which is a bigger deal, I think, for the A's than the Giants. Because I know it is. Because in theory, now you should be able to. They would have been a team that would have been blacked out in Las Vegas. which is weird. The Vegas is subject to a shitload of blackouts, and now without the blackouts, I still don't think they're ever going to actually successfully move there. But if they do, and if that's the plan, you want your future fans to be able to watch you. So there's no blackouts for them anymore, which is good. The Cardinals are still blacked out here, which I find odd because I was mentioned to Dave at the end of the podcast on Tuesday. There's a Rockford station that's going to start showing some Cardinal games. I mean, it's one of the sub channels. Dot something, but still, why? So I don't know how they're able to do that unless their blackouts are going to go away too. And then the Twins, they left the Bally's Sports, which is not that anymore. What is it? FanDuel? Bally's isn't the sponsor of those old Sinclair stations anymore, and I haven't looked yet today to see if, God, I hope they fix that stupid score bug. They have the worst, that long thing that goes across the bottom. It's terrible. Hopefully the new brand, they have a new score bug. Also holding out hopes that the Cubs will get a new one for opening day, real opening day, but I don't think they're going to. The Twins basically took control of selling their own packages, and they got distributed at like this morning. This is Thursday morning. They got on like all the big cable packages so they can be seen by all their fans finally. The reason I bring all that up, that tortured explanation, is CHSN still not on Comcast. Sox fans with Comcast can't see their team, which honestly, given the way this team's going to be fucking terrible again, you shouldn't be watching it regardless. But if you had any sense, you wouldn't be a White Sox fan. So why am I talking to you? But to me, it's really weird because I know for a fact that the biggest holdup in them getting distributed to Comcast was talking to them and saying, we're going to we'll put you on the sports and entertainment package, but not the regular package. And the CHN people are like, no, we can't have two regional sports networks in Chicago, and one is on the basic and one isn't. How would that make us look if the Cubs can be on the basic one, but the Sox can't be on it? Even especially since the CHSN comes with other stuff. It's all bad, the Bulls and the Blackhawks, but it comes with other stuff. Well, once the Cubs had to embrace the reality of they're moving to that higher tier, that should have easily opened the door for CHSN, but they haven't done it yet, which what that tells me is Comcast isn't offering them very much money. You get paid per subscriber, and you have to negotiate that rate. Supposedly the Cubs were getting $4 for every Comcast subscriber every month. That's a lot of money. And now I don't know if they're still getting $4. Sometimes if they bump you up a tier, the amount you get goes up, but the amount of subscribers drops so dramatically that you don't come close to making it up. But I don't know if the Cubs even have enough leverage to ask for more money. They may just they're getting $4 from every subscriber, and that subscriber thing has gone way down. We heard from Cap and Gordon that the Cubs expected 40% of their TV revenue to disappear, which is great. Marquee has been such a wonderful thing. The broadcasts are worse. The programming around it is embarrassing, and now they're making far less money. But other than that, it all worked out great. But there's a whole bunch of Sox fans that can't watch, and I mean, it's just a thing for me. I have CHSN, even though I have Comcast, because I have a antenna, and they are on a channel I can get over the air, and I have the antenna, and I even hook the damn thing back up, and I never watch them. I never watch the Bulls or the Blackhawks on there. It's like, it takes like 2 extra clicks to get there. What am I? Made out of money? It doesn't make any sense. I just don't do it. It's like, I got to press 3 buttons. Nah, it's not worth it. Now, if the team were good, I would do it. If somebody was good. None of those teams are any good. So nobody's going to do it. Last thing I want to talk about is mock applause fills the internet. We gave all of our picks last week. There was only one podcast, and it was the mega blowout. Both baseball podcasts at the same time It was Dave, Oleg, Praz, and me, and we made our picks and we did all kinds of stuff. And it was a lot of fun. If you haven't listened to that, listen. It's still funny. It still holds up. But I just wanted to quickly run through my picks again, so you could hear them all. The only reason I did this is Praz wrote all of his out and posted them today on the Blue Skies and the tweeters. And I thought, that's a good idea to just remind people how smart we are with our picks. So here's a second chance to hear from me. And you should run, don't walk to a sports book. Maybe the one sticking out of Wrigley. And you can make a lot of money off my genius. In the National League, there's a division winners. In the West, I took the plucky young Dodgers. What is their over under? 102 and a half, 103 and a half, 103 and a half. You don't pay if you go over. You don't get paid till you win 104 games. I wonder if it went down when Mookie checked in at 112 pounds or whatever he's weighing at these days. I'm really worried about him. Dave and I have joked about it, but we both talked about it. It's kind of scary. He really doesn't know what's wrong with it yet. Could just be a bad bug, but he lost 10% of his body weight in like 8 days. I mean, you can get really sick and lose 3 or 4 pounds. And that's if you weigh a normal amount. He's 170 some pounds and he lost 17 pounds in 8 days. Oof. Hot diarrhea geyser. I took the Dodgers. And if you made me bet it, I didn't bet this, but if you made me bet over under, I would take the over. I know it's ridiculous. It's 104 wins, but they're so good. They really are good. The one thing that I guess would give you a pause is that if they were in how many games would they win if they were in the Central? Like 120? The West is pretty tough. The Diamondbacks should have a good team. The Padres, if they don't sell more guys off, are good. And even the Giants aren't bad. The Giants are basically the Cubs. Maybe the Cubs may have gotten a little better than the Giants. But that's the thing, I watch my West Coast team are the Giants because I like their announcers, Mike Krukow and Dwayne Kuiper. And it's the last couple of years, it's like, oh God, I just feel like I'm watching the same team twice. I got to find a team. I got to find somebody else. I'm watching the Cubs in blue, and then I watch them wearing black and orange. It's the same team, back to back, 6 hours of this shit. But it'll be, if the Dodgers were in a worse division, they would really rack up a lot of wins. But they're going to rack up a lot regardless. In the Central, I went back and forth, and I was going to pick the Reds just to be different, and because I do think they have a chance. I like them more than the Brewers this year, and I just don't think the Pirates they're just going to piss away the Paul Skeens years. It's very clear. They wouldn't have to spend that much to give him a decent offense. With all that pitching, I know Jerry Jones is hurt and Bubba Chandler isn't up yet, but at some point, relatively early in the season, their starting pitchers are just to be loaded, and they're just not going to score. It's stupid. So I don't even put them in the conversation. And the Cardinals, they're not even trying to win. My one concern is that you don't have to try to win in the Central, and they'll be like, you get a couple of career years out of the guys that are still around, and it's like, hey, guess who's ahead of the Cubs? Great. But I don't think it's going to happen. They're pretty bad. But I still ended up picking the Cubs. I feel like the Reds are. I think Hunter Green is really good, but they just don't have that park is tough to pitch in, and they don't have the pitchers to make up for it. So go with the Cubs, because God, if they can't win this division this year, what are we doing any of this for? And then in the East, I took the Barbs. Everybody got hurt last year, and they still made the playoffs. A very quick trip, but they still made the playoffs. They should be better this year. I really do like the Phillies. And Dave and I talked about, the Phillies probably do have the best. They certainly have the best starting pitching in baseball, and they've got a good offense. I feel like they're just a team, though, that they'll get in the playoffs, and then that's when they'll get serious. They've done it before. So I'm not going to pick them to win but I picked them to be my 3 wild cards were the Phillies, the D-bags, and I took the Giants, which I think is probably dumb. but I didn't know who else to take. Probably the Padres instead of them, but why not? I do like the Phillies. I think they are probably, once you get to the playoffs, the second best team, maybe in baseball, behind the Dodgers, and the one team I think that can actually can beat them. So I would be rooting for that. Diamondbacks found out that Jordan Montgomery needs Tommy John, and they probably don't care. They already regret signing him in the first place. They're like, ooh, insurance can pay for a big chunk of your contract now. Maybe they even need it. Maybe the team doctor just told him, oh yeah, we're going to have to do Tommy John. Again, I just had it a few years ago. Really? I guess it didn't take. And they cut he's left-handed, right? They just do it on his right arm. Just for the hell of it. I don't know if that happened. The American League, this was a stat that I broke out on Tuesday for Dave. According to Fangraphs, every team in the American League is within 10 games of each other except for the White Sox. They have everybody projected to win between 86 and 76 games, except for the White Sox, who they predict will win 12, which I think is high. So it's hard to, everybody's in it, but it's hard to stand out. And I do think the Rangers are really good, but their pitching is dying. And then here was the thing. So on the preview, I talked about Jack Leiter. Now, I really like Jack. And I think he would be like a good fantasy sleeper. And the last picks of our fantasy draft were back-to-back picks were me and then Oleg, who was listening to me on the podcast. And I took Kumar Rocker. I sat there like, should I take Leiter? And I'm like, no, I'll take Rocker, because he's rated higher. And then I knew I was going to have to make some roster moves. Like I was going to put Shohei the pitcher on the injured list. I was going to put Ronald Acuna on the injured list. And that was a whole thing about how I drafted a shitload of outfielders and forgot to get one for the first games. That is the bats that we can play right field until Mike Trout plays 5 games out there and qualifies. Ronald Acuna finally comes off the IL. But I'm like, okay, I'll take Rocker here because he's more likely to get picked, and then I'll pick up Leiter on waivers. And Oleg took Leiter with the very next pick after me. It's like, all right, don't talk about this stuff on your stupid podcast. One of your co-hosts is going to steal your guy. I don't think it's really good. I doubt at the end of the year I'm going to oh, if I had just had Jack Leiter, everything would have been better. But that's kind of the problem with the Rangers, right? Like that's 40% of their rotation now is Rocker and Leiter. There's 2 guys who could be good, but they also could be not good. But I'm picking them to win the West. I'd really like to pick the Mariners, but they just don't seem to want to fix their offense ever. Although maybe a full year of Randy Arozarena will help. They're the ones that have Rowdy Tellez, right? I don't like him. I think that's great. I took the Tigers to win the Central. Mostly because the Twins didn't do anything, but Twins might still just win that division. The Guardians really, really overperformed they got a lot more wins than their numbers said they should have, and I doubt they repeat that. Plus, they gave Eli Morgan to the Cubs and Bat Boyd. So, how are you going to win without 8 starts from Bat Boyd and Eli Morgan's 78-mile-an-hour fastball? Yeah, maybe they know more than we do. In the East, I took the Orioles. I do think the Red Sox did the most to get better. I just feel like the Orioles, I know why Michael Elias is sitting on all those young players. The dream, if they all hit they don't even have to overperform, but they just have to, if they all come close to being above their baseline of what you predict for them, that's a really good team because it's really talented guys. But at some point, you got to add a couple of guys to put you over the top. Last year, they did it with Corbin Burns, and then just didn't bother to keep him, which makes no sense. I picked the Red Sox to be the number 1 wildcard team. I easily could flip them and the Orioles. I still took the Yankees, even though their pitching is falling apart, and they're going to rely on Marcus Stroman. I just think it's a good team. That they did a nice job of using the money that they tried to spend on Juan Soto and getting other players like Cody and Devin Williams. I don't know what they're going to get out of Paul Goldschmidt, but I mean, will they get more than they got out of Rizzo probably. They even gave him his jersey. I was just watching the game this afternoon. I was like, oh, it's Rizzo. No, that's not Rizzo. This is right-handed Rizzo. No, it's not. And I did pick the Mariners to win the West because the pitching is so good. That's why it pisses me off. They won't get a hitter because I think they'd have a legit chance to win the pennant. My most valuable players is Shohei's won 3 out of 4. He's been unanimous all 3 of those 4 years. It's just incredible. Probably going to win it again because, spoiler alert, he's the best player in baseball. Best player in the world. But it's so fun to pick Shohei all the time. So I took Ellie De La Cruz of the Reds, which, once again, I think I said this on that. It's like, if you think it's going to be close in the Central and you think Ellie's going to win the MVP, shouldn't you probably just pick the Reds? Yeah, you probably should. But I didn't. In the American League, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to win one of these days. He might as well win it now. Why not? It's really good. Aaron Judge, also really good, but same kind of Shohei thing. Like, it's so fun to pick those guys. So, why not? Joe Buck is doing the one-off ESPN game. They just asked Joe Buck if he wanted to do opening day. Sure, why not? And it's him and Joe Girardi and Bill Schroeder so they took a Brewer announcer and they took a guy who used to manage the Yankees. And I think Joe still works for Yes once in a while, right? So Yankee announcer to do opening day, which was fine. Joe pointed out something that I'd forgotten, which was 2 years ago in right field, the Yankees remodeled right field and made like the judges' chambers or whatever they call it. And then Aaron didn't play an inning at right field last year. He played center field the whole year. Because they're sitting over there like, oh, we're still doing this, but he can't even hear us from there. Well, he's back in right field now. So he's back amongst his peoples. The Cy Youngs, I don't even know who you'd pick if you don't pick Paul Skeens. Maybe Jameson Taillon. Probably not. And Tarek Skubal. He's really good. Probably the best. Well, I think those 2 guys are probably the 2 best pitchers in baseball. So why not pick them? Rookies of the year. Apparently I'm a big Dan Kantrovitz fan because I picked 2 guys drafted by the Cubs minor league whatever guy. Matt Shaw of the Cubs instead of Roki. Although Roki didn't throw very many strikes in Tokyo, but nobody can hit anything he throws. So I'd probably get that figured out. So I took Matt Shaw because I think maybe he'll just hit maybe the leg kick will work. I don't think it's going to. But I'm sure that he can make that adjustment. Be pretty good. Cubs really need him to be, too. And then I took Cam Smith just because as a sad Cub fan, it's like, no, he's probably going to hit 35 homers as a rookie. And oh, well. And then my managers of the year, I took Tito Francona once again. So I have the Reds manager of the year, MVP, and I didn't pick him to beat the Cubs. And AJ Hinch of the Tigers. I think Tigers are going to be pretty good. And I don't think you have to be that good to win the Central, so why not give it to AJ? He probably should have won it last year, but Stephen Vogt won it for the Guardians instead. So anyway, I will say I am looking forward to real games. I kind of wish they were at a more sensible time. The Cubs play a lot of 9 o'clock games, which is fine. I can stay up. I'm a big boy. But it's come on. Can't you play at normal times for baseball? But they're not doing that. So that's fine. Yeah, okay, one quick thing before I finish. Yeah, I've threatened to finish before, but it's a package. You can turn this off. Don't, but you could. If you've heard about, there's the show on Netflix, Adolescence, which is a 4-part thing. The episodes are about an hour. And the whole gimmick to them is that they're all shot in one shot. Like, the camera doesn't cut from scene to scene. You just follow it. And the gimmick itself is very well done. It's really kind of cool to see how you switch from one person to another. but you don't have to watch it just for the gimmick. Like it's an incredibly good show. It's sad. It's not like a good time, but the every episode is completely different. Like same characters and everything, but a completely different part of the story. And if you at the end, if you have to rank the 4, it would be really hard to do, which I think is a really good thing. It's a great show. So I highly recommend that. It's only 4 hours of your life to watch it. I thought it was 3, so I sat down one night to watch, and I started watching, and I thought the first one was amazing, and then I watched the second one, and I'm like, oh, this is great. It's going to wrap up in 3. And when I found out it was 4, I was like, oh, I was actually like, oh, that's good, because it was so good. I was glad to have another hour. Usually that's not the case. You're like, there's another one of these? Oh, God. But no, it was worth it. That's a very good show. I think I've talked about this. I think I wrote about it at least. I think the best show on TV right now is on Max, and it's The Pit. It's a medical drama with Noah Wyle that is not ER Part 2, even though the Michael Crichton family, the estate, is suing John Wells, the creator. And I guess he was going to make like an ER sequel with Dr. Carter, and they just decided not to do it, and they feel like the show is too similar to what that was going to be. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is the show is amazing. It's a 15-episode season. Every episode is an hour in that day. So this whole season unfolds over one 15-hour shift at an emergency room in Pittsburgh. And it's really good. Like, it's incredible. And it's another one where as I started, I couldn't remember how many episodes there were, and we were getting close to episode 10, and that's kind of the magic number. And I realized that 10 wasn't going to be the season finale. There were going to be 5 more after that. I was very happy. It's really good. Really well done. Another thing, it could also, that hour, that real-time hour could be a gimmick, but it's not. It's really good. So I like that. And I did watch the first couple episodes of The Studio, which is like an inside baseball look at a fictional movie studio where Seth Rogen becomes the head of the studio, and you follow him around. I thought both episodes that Apple has put out so far are really good. I know Fells really liked The Franchise. That was a similar show that was on Max 6 months ago. In that one, you followed the filming of a DC or Marvel type superhero movie and how ridiculous those are and the shit that happens on set and whatever. And I knew from reading the book MCU, which was written by, I should know who wrote it. She's a staff writer at The Ringer. And it goes into the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it got started and all the weird things that happened along the way. And so if you've read that book, you know that most of the seemingly super ridiculous shit that happens in the franchise is based on things that actually happened. I just didn't think the show was very funny. It was a comedy that I just didn't think was that well executed. There is there are some funny things that happen. There is one really great moment in the very last episode, though, that involves a bridge, and it's so good, and you don't really see it coming, and then it happens, and that was very well done. So that's not a bad show. I just didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, and The Studio, I think, has more promise as a show that covers a similar thing, which is the kind of the ridiculous, weird shit that happens as people try to get movies made. But I think it just promises to be funnier. So there's that. And I'm very excited. I think within the same week, season 2 of Andor. If you don't like Star Wars, well, you're not going to like Andor. But if you do like Star Wars, you're going to love it because it's one of the best Star Wars things they've ever made. But then also the second season of The Last of Us on Max, which is incredible. And I just realized that I should have rewatched both of those first seasons. And now with baseball started, I don't have time. Oh, no. Everyone feel very sorry for me. I don't have time to cram in even more good TV to watch. Anyway, I have some newsletter readers who really like when I do the end of the year lists of the books I read. And the book I'm reading right now is not going to be any like, oh my God, what is that book? But I watched Silo on Apple TV, and I think it's really good. And after the second season, I asked somebody who knew that's based on 3 books by this guy named Hugh Howey. And I said, all right, if I read the first book now, are we past it? And he said, we're basically at the end of that book. So you're not going to get spoiled now. So I read it. And I read that first book is Wool, and I read it. I really liked it. But I realized that enough things change that you can watch the show and read the book, and you could watch like there's the fear, right? That if you read ahead and then you go to watch the show, you're like, well, I already know what happens. I don't think we have to worry about that. I think they've had to change enough stuff, and they've chosen to change enough stuff that it's still going to be like, oh, they did this instead of that. So right now I'm on the second book, which is Shift. So Wool is about this. I'm not going to get into the whole thing about the silo, but there are these silos, and people have to live in them because there's nuclear wasteland up above. The Wool talks about that, and but Shift talks about what happened to get them in there, and then the early years of them in there, and then the last one is a book called Dust. And so when I finish Shift, I'm going to go read Dust. So I'm reading those. I'm not like a big sci-fi nerd, but at least reading wise, like I like Star Wars. I still like Star Wars. Remember, I didn't read Dune forever because everybody told me it was such a hard book to read, and then I read it as a grown-up and went, well, I don't think it was that hard to read. It was a good book. Then I read Dune Messiah, which is the second book. And then I realized, okay, things are getting weird, and I'm done reading the Dune books. I think I made the right choice. Yeah, so that. I read a book by Tom Hanks. It's called The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece, which is kind of like, it's a book about, follows a movie getting made. Apparently I have a thing. And I found it to be a very odd book in that I found it very cringy, like the first 5 or 6 chapters. I felt like it was overwritten. And all of a sudden it wasn't anymore. Like he got into a groove, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really good book. So it's another thing that Tom Hanks can do. That's good. The other thing I read more recently was I read James by Percival Everett. That's not a big, shock. I mean, it's like if you walk by a bookstore, there are still bookstores. You'll see like 1,000 copies of James that they're selling because it's a great book. It's a retelling of the Huck Finn story from Jim's standpoint. And I did a thing that I'm really glad I did. I bought James actually for my wife for Christmas, and then I went out and got a copy of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn because I hadn't read that. I don't know if I'd ever read it. I think I read it. I think I thought I read it as a kid, but as I was reading, I don't think I read it. I feel like you know the story because you've heard about parts of it and you've seen the movie and other stuff. So I read Huck Finn first, and then I read James, and I'm really glad I did that because you could really see how some of the subtle things that he changed. There's a lot of really obvious things that he changed, but there's some subtle stuff. I thought that was really good. So James is worth your time. It's a great book, and it's an easy read. But I really like that. So there you go. So if you stuck around for a little extra time, you got TV shows to watch and books to read. Why not? Schedule for the podcast is basically what we did last year. It's every other, so Tuesdays there's baseball day. Dave Brown one week and then Oleg and Praz the next. There will still be Thursdays with Tom Loxis, but Tom is restarting his podcast. At least he claims he is. I was supposed to be his first guest twice this week. He canceled both times. He's bringing his back, so he won't be on every Thursday here because of that, which is also why you got a solo podcast today, because I'm like, I want to do one and I can whip one together real quick. You're probably like, yes, we can tell that you whipped it together really quick. But I'm going to be on his and he's going to be on mine. And then we're each going to have some of those Thursdays will be other people on his and other people on mine. Or just me blabbing away like this. So anyway, that's the thing. And opening day, there's always a sale. Bonus Exercise Newsletter, 25% off. And that is going on right now. So if you don't subscribe. And if you do, tell your friends that it's worth it, even if you don't think it is. All right. I'll talk to you guys again next Tuesday with Oleg and Praz. Go Cubs.
Many of us have herpes.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. I mean, got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much. Awesome.